BBC stands accused of seriously misleading the public before the US presidential election. A whistleblower claims, and footage appears to show, that the BBC doctored footage of Donald Trump's speech, making him appear to encourage the Capitol Hill riots. According to an internal whistleblowing memo seen by The Telegraph, the whistleblower claims that the Panorama program, ironically broadcast a week before the US general election, completely misled viewers by showing them that President Trump was telling his supporters to go down to Capitol Hill and fight like hell. Now, I'm going to show you this clip in a minute. What this says is the Panorama edit and the original clip, because this is so important, because news companies should absolutely be giving you an unbiased truth as to what they are reporting. And that is why it is more important than ever that you have individual and independent voices like mine on my channel here to come and talk to you about these things and comment on what's in the news and give you my views. So please do subscribe to the channel. I'll be very grateful to that. I am in no way affiliated with any of these news companies. I am independent. Now, let's take a look at this footage here. This appears to be the Panorama edit on the left-hand side, which was broadcast to the public, and what they say is the original clip on the right-hand side. Now, I'm going to show you both of these. I will go back to the beginning. Take a look at this and let me know what you think in the comments below. This is the Panorama edit, they say.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and I'll be there with you, and we fight. We fight like hell.
So quite clearly, and the reason this is so important is I know a lot of people that saw this program that spoke to me about Donald Trump, and that's what they said. They said that they believed that it encouraged people to go down to Capitol Hill and to riot, to fight like hell. They said, how is this not inciting people to riot? Now, let's take a look at what they say is the original clip. Let's watch on.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women.
Now, that's completely different. Now, there's a news story about this which shows you where the two segments of the Panorama edit come from, and they're something like an hour apart. So they are completely different. So the way that they've been slammed together makes it appear that it was encouraging the Capitol riot. So according to this article now, there is a 19-page dossier on BBC bias, which has been compiled by a recent member of the Corporation Standards Committee and is now circulating in government departments. It says that the program made the US President Donald Trump say things that he never actually said by splicing together footage from the start of his speech with something that he said nearly an hour later. It claims that senior executives and the BBC's chairman ignored and dismissed a string of serious complaints raised by the corporation's own standards watchdog. Donald Trump Jr. accused the BBC of dishonesty and fake news. He posted the Telegraph story on X, writing, "The fake news reporters in the UK are just as dishonest and full of mess as the ones here in America." But in addition to what Trump was made to have appeared to say, the documentary also showed flag-waving men marching on the Capitol in Washington, D.C. after the president spoke, which created this impression that Trump supporters had taken up his so-called call to arms. In fact, the footage was shot before he even started speaking. So the people walking around were nothing to do with what Donald Trump had said because he hadn't said it yet. More alarmingly than that, when the issue was raised with managers, they refused to accept that there'd been a breach of standards. This report's author then warned Samir Shah, BBC chairman, of the very, very dangerous precedent set by Panorama, but received no reply. The whistleblower sent a copy of this 19-page letter to every member of the BBC board last month. Boris Johnson, in the middle here, says this is a total disgrace. The BBC doctored footage of Donald Trump to make it look as though he incited a riot, when in fact he said no such thing. Nigel Farage said then it's no wonder that fewer people are paying the BBC licence fee every single year. For the avoidance of doubt, the BBC licence fee is if you watch or record live TV. More about that in the second half of the video, because there's something alarming about that as well from another one of my viewers. I'll come back to that in a minute. Former radio presenter Liz Kershaw has also said, "This is no surprise to me. I presented news and current affairs programs on the BBC on 4 stations from 1993 to 2011. The biased groupthink among its journalists was outrageous and had to be fought and rebalanced every day. And so the reason this is so important and somewhat alarming, frankly, is the way that stories are put across to you in different headlines with different language, charged language, polarized and polarizing language, making people think one thing or another. Just because somebody has a view, they shouldn't be labeled for it. But there is a stark warning to you, because you'll remember my video yesterday of Tommy Robinson being cleared of this terrorism charge. Of course, within 24 hours, all of the news has jumped all over it. And for that, I'm going to show you something here. Now, this is a tool that I use called Ground News. This is a sponsored portion, but it will illustrate to you just how polarizing these headlines can get. Tommy Robinson cleared of terror charge over phone pin refusal is the big, broad headline. Now, Ground News here, which is a tool that I use, which shows you both sides of any political spectrum. You can see a bias distribution on the right-hand side there, whether the story is covered by the left or the right, or the white in the middle is somewhat neutral outlets. And Ground News has a bias comparison, so you can get a very quick glance as to what the left and the right are saying about this story. And as you can see here, the left-leaning coverage frames the individual as far-right or anti-Islam activist, sometimes calling him a waste man despite his acquittal. Right-leaning outlets, on the other hand, conversely portray him as a citizen journalist or a veteran street organizer, celebrating the outcome with cries of free speech and highlighting Elon Musk's financial backing. But you can also see this playing out in the headlines. Looking at some of the left-leaning headlines, looking at the first one, UK anti-Islam activist Tommy Robinson thanks Musk after being cleared of terrorism charge. And again, the next one down, far-right UK activist Tommy Robinson cleared of terror charge. But now moving to some of the right-leaning headlines, Tommy Robinson has the last laugh after politically motivated terrorism arrest, free speech won. And another one, British right-wing activist Tommy Robinson cleared of bogus terrorism charges thanks to Elon Musk for funding his defense. And so if you'd like to make sure you get both sides of a story, you get 40% off using my code BBB. Just go to the link ground.news/BBB. I'll put it in the description below. Get yourself 40% off, unlimited access to the world's news, making sure that you get both sides of a story and you don't miss a thing. This is so important. So back to the BBC. They're not quite off the hook in my video just yet. This is not the only time the BBC's been criticised, and even recently, including its footage covering the Middle East. Now, so much so, this has now reached a committee in Parliament, and there is a letter to the chair of the BBC as follows. Following media coverage about possible breaches of standards within the BBC, I'm writing to seek information from the BBC about the document and wider issues it raises about editorial standards. Mr. Prescott is reported to have raised particular concerns about the Panorama programme Trump: A Second Chance, the programme broadcast in October 2024. It features clips of Donald Trump's speech outside the Capitol in Washington, D.C., which were edited together to suggest Trump told the crowd, "We're going to walk down to the Capitol and I'll be there with you and we fight like hell." Mr. Prescott is reported as saying it was completely misleading to edit the clip in the way Panorama aired it. There's been additional coverage based on Mr. Prescott's report today, raising further questions about the BBC's coverage of the Middle East. The BBC promotes itself as the UK's most widely used and trusted source of news. I'm extremely worried that coverage of Mr. Prescott's report is suggesting the BBC is engaging in precisely the kind of presentation that is associated with less trusted news sources. Given the extensive coverage it's already received, the committee will be grateful if you provide us with a copy of Mr. Prescott's report. And then it goes on to ask the usual, what actions are you taking? What were the findings? What actions are you taking as chair? What assurances can you give that the process and practices have changed sufficiently to be confident that this doesn't happen again? But then we come back to the article, because there's even more than that. Mr. Prescott said that he was shocked to discover that there was no similar program examining the record of Kamala Harris, the rival, of course, of President Trump at the time. He said there was no screen wipe or caption over the footage to signal to viewers that it was edited or was out of sequence. For example, this bit, separated by a screen wipe to this bit, might show you that they were recorded at different times. They weren't. Sometimes they are, in fact. I mean, sometimes if I miss something out, I'll record it afterwards and I'll come back and I'll splice it in. So this little segment here, I recorded at the very end of the video once I'd done all of the rest of it. But I'm not misleading you if I'm doing it in a way that is helping you to understand the video, because if I feel that something wasn't quite right, sometimes I'll record it again and I'll come back and I'll splice it in. and you've probably never noticed. Well, the video editors and certainly the broadcasters among you will probably notice, but most people probably don't notice that. He said it was completely misleading to edit the clip in the way Panorama aired it. And this is another bit that will answer a lot of people's questions, because a lot of people said, how come he wasn't charged for inciting riot? Well, the fact that he did not explicitly encourage supporters to go down and riot was one of the reasons there were no federal charges to incitement to riot, because he didn't say it. So one way or another, I would hope and expect that this investigation goes further and finds out exactly what the BBC is going to do about this, because frankly, they cannot get away with broadcasting something like that. If indeed that was as alleged, they cannot get away with that. Now, very briefly before you go, one of my viewers sent me a couple of things about TV licensing, so I thought I'd talk to you about that briefly here, because this is quite alarming as well. Coincidentally, I did my video about TV licensing just the other day. Around about that time, they had a visit from a TV licensing officer. The officer said that he didn't have a license there and started asking questions, name and all of these kind of things. My viewer said that he does own a TV, but doesn't watch any live channels or iPlayer. Now, I would recommend against engaging in conversation, unless, of course, they have a warrant and you're complying with your duty, but I've discussed that in other videos. But he started to say that he does have a TV, but he doesn't watch live TV. He only uses YouTube and podcasts and that kind of thing. But then the officer said that since he doesn't watch normal TV, he said they have to come inside to check that the TV doesn't have any apps installed that could be used to watch live broadcasts. Now, my warning here is, unless they have a warrant, you don't let them in. Now, the problem here is, if they come in and they see a TV with an app that could, in theory, receive a live broadcast, that in and of itself is not evidence that you're committing the offence, unless, of course, you've installed it for that purpose, which is the obscure one under the law. But merely having it there is not in and of itself evidence of an offence, but it could be enough for them to get a warrant, which means they could come and search the premises for evidence that you are watching or recording live TV. So unless they have a warrant, I would not encourage any conversation at all. It's sad that I have to say that, but I do, because I think it could be misconstrued, misrepresented, misinterpreted, and so on. But then my viewer also received this: investigation open, and asked me, when does this become harassment? Because they visited, they send letters, they now get this one to say investigation open. Is this to leave someone in a state of terror forevermore with no end to it unless they buy a license? Because that might well, this is not legal advice, but that might well cross the border into harassment. Because there has been a case that I've talked about previously where if a law firm continuously threatens litigation or tells you that they've done something when they haven't, they could be liable for harassment. And I think it will take just one test case for the BBC licensing to change everything about what they're doing here. It says, after several reminders about making payments, your license has now expired. The details have been sent to the enforcement team in your area, and we've started an investigation. Now, as a lawyer, I question the wording here, because enforcement team? What are they enforcing? They've got no court order, they've got no judgment, they've got no fine, no order to pay. What is it they're enforcing? They can't say they're enforcing the license fee, because you only pay it if you need a license. There's no enforcing it otherwise if you don't actually need one. But also in conjunction, they received a letter as well, which says only 10 days to go. Now, a lot of people have been worried about this. Now, my guidance would be, don't be too worried about it unless they have a warrant to come into your premises and to get evidence. Then you don't have to talk to them. They would need evidence to prosecute you in the first place, and they would certainly need evidence to uphold a prosecution beyond reasonable doubt that you're watching or recording live TV or consuming BBC content on BBC iPlayer, or you've installed something for the purpose of any of the above, and they would need to prove it. But it says here, I think this is quite intimidating. If you do not sort out your license, we'll schedule an enforcement visit. Now, an enforcement visit sounds like they are coming to the premises to take money from you, take goods from you, take your belongings, which they can't do unless they are enforcement officers with a writ or a warrant of control, and they are enforcing that against you for non-payment of a fine or something of that nature. So if you've got examples, please do send them to me. But also, if you see any news and you see headlines and things that are trying to tell you one thing or another, always think twice. Is it misleading you? Is it what you really saw? And with that, I thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.